And after that, it's open to the audience, but if the audience does not have a question, then I will provide one. So get all your questions out as much as you can, get as much feedback from the speakers as possible. For the speakers, I will be timing your response 3 minutes just so we don't go over time or anything like that. When you have 30 seconds, I'll tap it once. When your time's up, I'll tap it twice. Same procedure as always. Oh, by the way, I am Christian Novia, Vice President of the Political Science Club, and I will be your moderator. How about we start off with each of our speakers saying a little bit something about themselves. Bill?
I'm Bill Hibbs. I'm the Vice President of Westchester University College Republicans. And yeah, I'm not like, my dad isn't like a fracker or anything, so someone happens to support it, so there we go.
I'm Juliette Honsinger. I'm a recent graduate of Westchester University. I graduated back in May. I was a history major, and I was the former president of the Earth Group.
Okay. And just to make sure I have this sign-in sheet, I guess, for Dr. Zink, Sociology and Anthropology. If anybody didn't sign that, I'm going to put it over here somewhere. Just not the other row. And we'll start this debate with just an introductory explanation to the people. I'm sure there's plenty who don't know what fracking is, and I'll ask the question, what exactly is fracking to you, Mr. Hibbs?
Okay, well, fracking has been going on for about 60 years, and it involves drilling thousands of feet down to the ground through the Marcellus Shale. And it used to be where they would just get to natural gas just from what you can get from vertically. But then our technology's increased, and now we can drill horizontally. So now we drill horizontally as well, so we can gain better access to the natural gas. Then the holes in the tunnels that we drilled are cased with cement, and then a fracturing device at the very end of the tunnel causes fractures in the rock, and we insert a mixture to cause the natural gas to extract through the tunnels, and then we suck it back up, and then it's ours.
Okay. And for so the first question, does anybody from the audience have an initial question to ask to start off this debate?
When you said it's been going on for 60 years, is that in the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania, or is that
Across America. Texas.
Any other questions? All right. First question I have here, is fracking safe for workers? I'll leave that to start with you.
Yes, there are very few instances where wells blow up and kill people. There have been some instances, obviously, where wells blown up, but for the most part, they are extremely safe. There's thousands of wells in Pennsylvania, and we don't hear they're not blowing up in a large rate. So, yeah.
I would respond to saying that by saying there's not a lot of research going on with what the effects of fracking are right now. So it's really hard to say what the effects on the workers are, besides gas leaks that we already know about and wells blowing up. A lot of the effects of the chemicals used in the process aren't being studied. A lot of the effects like methane leaks are not being studied. So it's really hard to say what the actual effects will be. But the evidence we do have says that it's not safe for workers anyway, considering the leaks and blow-ups.
Any questions from the audience?
I'm curious, when you said that there weren't wells blowing up at an alarming rate, the Department of Environmental Protection for Pennsylvania actually said that there was going to be one serious environmental concern for every 150 wells. So depending upon how many wells you want to, drill all over Pennsylvania, that could mean like 100 to like thousands of spills if you do the math. So when you say that there's not going to be a lot of spills, did you have some kind of statistics to back that?
I did not, but like I said, it's been going on for 60 years, and we probably would have stopped if it would have continued to blow up. And you say that the EPA, or Pennsylvania EPA, or whichever agency you cited, you can't accurately predict how many spills there are going to be per however many wells we drill. You can't predict that.
You said for 60 years and nothing's happened, but it's not been anywhere close to this level. I mean, it may have been here and there. They didn't really know how productive it could be until recently, I guess, or now that they're passing laws starting to really know what this level of drilling sites can do.
Can I respond?
Yes.
Okay. How I would respond to that to say is, even if the drilling has been going on for 60 years, it's never been practiced in this way, which is horizontal drilling. The difference between vertical drilling and horizontal drilling is that there are a lot more fractures at the point in the shale. And why that's a lot more risky is because it is not only at one fracture, but many. And so the amount of gas collected is multiplied by how many fissures you have in the shale. And so part of the reason why we don't know the risks, we don't know what will happen, what the environmental risks to it are accurately, is because there's no research going on with it because it's so new. This process of hydraulic horizontal fracturing has only been put into practice in the past few years. And so when we talk about it's been going on for 60 years, it really hasn't. It's been going on for a few because it's not been practiced in this way.
Mike Cook, Political Science Club. Just wanted a question about what is being injected into these fissures, what are other chemicals that I know you gave mention to that there are other chemicals are pumped in, other fluids are pumped in. What are those chemicals per se, and are they affected? Do they affect ground conditions? Do they affect water supplies? What is the effect of these chemicals?
To me, or
That's, well, I wanted to be, if you have information on it, if you feel information on it.
I do have a little bit. This is from the Pennsylvania EPA. It's a whole list of chemicals. I think it's over 100 different chemicals besides water and sand that's being used in the process. It doesn't state specifically how these chemicals are affecting health or the land base or anything of that sort, but I think a good thing to point out is that the gas companies were not pressured or even forced to release these chemicals up until recently. They might have done it on their own volition, but they were not required to. So that, I think, would lead us to question why they're not releasing them. And it's not to say that it is a definite, but we need to question why they're not releasing them, or why they're not required to release them. And so yes, there are over 100, and they include things like kerosene, oil mist, alcohol, and a bunch, propylene, xylene. They're just chemicals that go on, and a lot of them aren't very recognizable, but they are over 100.
right. And while there are over hundreds of chemicals, but you have to remember 99.5% of fracking fluid is just water and sand. So the hundreds of chemicals make up 0.5% of the mixture.
Although they said in the most recent House Representatives thing that only 70% of the water is recycled out of that. I mean, and you brought up the percentages, but I mean, like, what about that other 30%? What do we do with that?
Well, I've actually read reports where 100% of the water is recycled or close enough to it.
Okay.
So,
Well,
but regardless, the water can be treated and placed somewhere safe, as long as there's enough oversight to make sure that's done correctly.
The company's going to be responsible for doing it.
The company should be responsible for getting rid of the excess water, but it should be oversighted by obviously someone from the state or the county.
Okay. Is the company going to pay?
The company should pay for it, and they should oversight.
I'll go off of that question and say that at the moment it is the companies who are regulating all of this. And while that may seem like a good thing because they're paying the cost for it, there's also not any oversight that's going on by the people living in these areas. When a company is in control of regulating themselves, I think that can turn into a very problematic situation, because when there's no oversight by the people or the government, it can lead to slip-ups and cover-ups and that sort of thing. Also, when you say that 99.5% of the mixture is water, there is over 1 million gallons of water that goes into each well. So when you talk about only 0.5% of this mixture being chemicals, you're talking about 5,000 gallons a well of this chemical mixture. So even while it doesn't seem like that much percentage-wise, you're still talking 5,000 gallons of chemicals per well in one station.
question?
What current regions of the state of Pennsylvania are subjected to fracking procedures, like other than just the Marshall Shale area? How many companies operate in Pennsylvania?
It's hard to say. There are a few that are involved. Exxon recently teamed up with a group called, I have to look up the name. It's called Texas, I believe. XTC Texas company. It's a company based in Texas, and they grouped with Exxon to create a company that has over 1 million leases in New York, 1 million acres leased in New York. New York has a ban on fracking, so that's not going on, but they're a huge company. And number 2 is Chesapeake, which is also taking part in the drilling. But other than that, it's kind of hard to say because it's kind of an up-and-coming phenomenon that's taking place. So it's hard to say how many.
Oh, yeah, in the back.
I can actually answer that question because I'm from Wayne County, and that's a huge fracking area right now. That's in
So is
northeastern
Lackawanna.
Pennsylvania.
Basically, so we've got like region, it's like a little bit above here and then towards.
Wayne County's the only one I know about.
Lackawanna is big too.
You say that New York has a ban on it. Now, like, how do they pull that off?
It's a moratorium on drilling for the moment. New York State has voted to ban drilling until there's been more scientific exploration in the state. But it's hard to say whether they will continue the ban as scientific research increases or pressure from the corporate world increases. But at the moment, there's a moratorium.
And they're staying strong. I mean, like
Yes.
they're doing well. They're not taking too much crap for it.
Hard to say.
Oh, okay.
But yes, at the moment, there's a moratorium.
Good.
So New York was the first state to ban this, of course, but they do allow this fracking fluid to be dumped in 3 different sites, at least, in their state. So I'm kind of curious if you could possibly, either you could offer an explanation as to why they would allow that if they don't allow fracking. If there are more risks involved with fracking, or they are just being paid off or something to be having dump sites in their state.
I can't really speak to why New York State has dumping sites, but yeah, sorry.
I wouldn't know how to respond to that. I haven't heard of it.
I have the names of the towns. if you want.
Back.
Well, speaking of New York's policy on fracking, Pennsylvania has decided not to tax drilling companies that are drilling in the state. And a lot of people feel that that's encouraging companies to come from other states here. Do you think that that has an effect on the environment or the community in that an enormous amount of business is coming here in fracking and drilling?
Can you just restate the question?
What do you think the effect is of the fact that Pennsylvania is not taxing or minimally taxing companies that drill in Pennsylvania?
What I would say is that there's a huge movement going on with natural gas drilling, is that corporate power is being shifted and that they're gaining a lot of ground in Pennsylvania. Some of the arguments I've heard as to why Pennsylvania is not taxing these companies as much as we would expect them to, perhaps, is because we want to attract the business. However, the fact of the matter is that last year, the most amount of wells sprung up in West Virginia, where there are more taxes on these companies. And so the evidence doesn't show us that the taxes do not scare away companies. The fact is that the gas is here. They can't go elsewhere for this gas. There is no reason not to tax these companies and reap the benefits for the citizens of the state. Just to go back to the facts, I think the evidence does not show us that the more taxes scare away business.
Yeah, I'd have to say I agree. It should be taxed. I know Governor Corbett has proposed drilling fees. I think it was like $160 $60,000 a well, but like I said, it should be taxed. And what it does bring to the region is it does bring a lot of jobs. In quarter two of 2011, which is this past quarter, Pennsylvania saw over 18,000 jobs created just by shale and its ancillary industries, so like the things that go into it as well. So it's a big job producer.
Okay, I'm going to jump in on that to put up a question with the fact that it does create jobs, and although it does seem to have some environmental detriment, I'm going to ask the panel, do the benefits of natural gas and drilling companies in Pennsylvania, does the benefits outweigh any sort of detriment that might be associated with environmental hazards? What do you want with that?
I'd say completely. It's worth it in every regard. Like I said, it's going to create jobs. America's a huge trade deficit, for those who aren't aware, and if we can produce more natural gas than we actually use, we could export to countries that are growing like India, China, and actually start really making money off it and put America back on the right track. So to me, yes, it does outweigh the cost.
I would say absolutely not, and it would go on every single front. As far as environmentally, we can see already how it's affecting our land bases. We're testing wells around drilling sites, and they're coming up with the first peer-reviewed study on gas drilling's effects on well water. It just came out this past May. The only peer-reviewed study on this subject matter, and they're coming up with statistics that show us that the methane level in water 1 kilometer near these drilling sites is 17 times more methane than water tested farther away. So we're talking about poisoned water, literally. And that is something that we can't ignore as being a detriment. And it's not just the sites, the places that are around these localities. All of the rivers that lead into the other parts of the state where there's not drilling going on, we will still experience that contamination of the water. As far as economically goes, perhaps it will create jobs immediately, but these companies are not even required to hire Pennsylvanians. Or are we job creation for who and for how long? We don't know. They're not required to hire people locally. They can bring people in from wherever they want. We don't have statistics to show who they're hiring. So as far as a long-term benefit goes, or even a short-term one, I would say absolutely not. The benefits outweighing what's detrimental about the situation.
Did you want to respond? I'm just getting a 30-second, maybe like.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, she's referring to a study with the 17 times more methane gas. She's referring to a study done by Duke University where they tested 68 wells. Now to me, testing 68 wells out of the thousands that are drilled every single year just isn't enough. You're using what? It's not near enough to use to accurately determine whether or not this has an effect.
Yes.
Speaking of accuracy, given the deficit of scientific research on this method of hydraulic fracturing, how can you say that the profit that we would make would outweigh the effect? For one thing, we don't even know what the effects are, but having looked through some of the chemicals that are in there, and like a number of them it's a host of teratogens and host birth effects, and it's hydraulic fracturing. It's not something where it's just going to go straight into the ground. It permeates and separates and goes up, and the issues that's coming up through the groundwater.
Well, actually, that same study found that there was, of all the chemicals they have in that mixture, none of it was in the groundwater.
Didn't you just say that study was insufficient? Then?
Yeah, but still, it's not 68 if it's still 0. That's 0%. And another thing is, I don't see how you can make the argument that this fluid is making its way up into our groundwater. The deepest well is around 300 feet. These fracking vents are about 3,000 feet down. Then there's a solid sheet of rock between them. That's what we're drilling through. So to me, I don't know how any mixture can permeate through a rock.
Well, I mean, ideally it's an impermeable solid layer, but we all know that nature it doesn't follow our rules. That there are going to be holes and places for diffuse the ground.
I don't see how that could happen.
Well, considering During the fact that you are actually fracturing this rock, during this process, there are chemicals released, or there are things that are trapped in this shale that are released once you fracture it. So what can you say about the radioactive materials that are coming up as a result of fracturing the shale? Do you think that they're a harm? Do you think that they go into the groundwater? Because if that, I mean, that is the rock that's in between the wells and what you're just talking about. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, they have like the tunnels they use are encased in cement. So what's going to happen is any of the harmful toxins and everything you're talking about is going to go into that, and it's going to come up and go up into their processing facility almost. Not really a processing facility, but it's like it drills for it's like what gathers it at the top. It's a series of pipes.
The radium levels in the Marcellus Shale are 260 times the safe disposal amount.
Right.
So how do they intend on processing them safely?
I don't know the exact details of how they process it, but if it's regulated properly, it can be done.
How many wells are actually regulated or attended to on a regular basis? Do you know?
I'm not aware of how many are, but it should be 100% of them.
Did you have a response at all?
My only response would be that at the current time, what's mostly going on is companies self-regulating. The people that go out to inspect these wells are from the company themselves. And so it's hard to say whether it's accurate or not. I think that we should be suspicious about companies going out and inspecting their own wells.
I'm a little with the state budget cuts and our university budget being shrinking every year. I'm concerned about the tax structure or any estimates on how much taxes we can get from the Marcellus Shale. Any estimates?
There was one, I did not write it down, but it's obviously going to be a lot, but really what the core of it is that there's going to be people who have working jobs now. Like the median salary for these 16,000 people that got jobs this past quarter was around like $50,000 a year. So they're making above the average wage. So the taxes will produce more money. So.
Did you want to fill your question in regards to the university life, or?
I was actually wondering about how are they going to collect taxes? You mentioned a fee imposed or a proposal for a fee. Is that like a yearly fee? Is that how much percentage? And following up with that, if the corporations are not responsible for any damage to the environment that's caused, obviously the state has to field that fee. And do the taxes cover that?
I could feel that by saying on 2 evenings ago, Corbett had a kind of a speech about new plans for the Marcellus Shale. And that included a fee for every drill pad that has been created. I believe it was a scale over 10 years, it would collect $160,000 per drill pad. However, there would be no new taxes, which means that for every new well created, there will be a fee. However, that does nothing for the wells that are already there. There will be no taxes on those and no fees. And so, considering how many wells are already in Pennsylvania, it will be hard to balance out what will be lost and what will be gained from these fees.
Yeah, the roof of the initial fee for the first year is $40,000 for the initial fee for each one, and then it only goes down from there. Each year after that, it keeps decreasing. And the part about that, I was watching it as well. Each individual county that they're counting land, if anybody wants to drill on that, they are the ones who get to decide the fee that they will charge each individual company. So companies may begin choosing which counties give them the lowest price, or you charge them the lowest price. So then we may, I believe it was the States Commissioners Association, said that they're really afraid of a border war going on, because if one county is giving you better prices than the other, would you go over there, and then would the counties start feuding with each other, and then this would be an even larger problem, separating county to county. And on that last one, back with the jobs, of the 700 of one of the companies that was looked at, only 300 of them were Pennsylvanians. So I don't know. That was just one of them. They said that as well during the speeches. But yeah. So do you think that these fees would be enough? And what's your feeling on the border wars that may be caused by the county-to-county fees proposed in Governor Corbett's most recent?
Well, what is inevitably going with the county border wars, it actually probably will become a problem. You are correct in that. It really should be a state flat. Like the state should decide, and that's what it should be. But the only advantage to counties doing it is if those people really don't want it, then they don't have to do it. So it does give more freedom to people who, if you're against it, you can be the official in your county who decides, and you can stop it.
So counties have the power to reject shelling?
They wouldn't have the power to reject, but they could make their fees so high that it would be sustainable.
40,000 is the very top that you can charge if it goes through. So no. And it would stay in the county, which leads back to the problem you had about the states getting it, putting it toward environmental things and other such state needs. They couldn't really shuffle it around as much because it would be in each county. Yeah.
The question that you're bringing up, I think, is, as I stated earlier, why we need to be thinking as Pennsylvanians about corporate control. Why are we fighting over borders and county lines when people, in fact, should be deciding whether drilling comes at all? I think that, in fact, takes away power from the people and gives it over to these corporations.
Now, there are several things out on the topic of whether or not natural gas burns cleaner than other energy sources out there. And I was curious if you had research to say whether or not it was cleaner or more efficient in its life cycle than anything else. Why choose natural gas over anything else?
Well, I think a big reason to choose it, regardless of if it is actually cleaner than oil or not, is the fact that we have so much of it. It can be such a big money producer, and it can provide us energy independence like we strive to have, and we know it works, unlike some things like solar and stuff doesn't really work as well.
How long do we expect to be providing natural gas?
Apparently, we have enough to provide the eastern seaboard, or the eastern seaboard power for the next 50 years. So it's a tremendous amount of electricity.
Earlier you spoke of exporting that. I want to go down a little further.
Sorry, if I could address your question as to why natural gas would be a cleaner gas than other sources of energy. I would say that it's not. I would say that this is a ploy that the gas companies are using to try to make this more appealing to skeptics. The only study that's out there on methane in well water estimates that 8% of the methane in the shale is released into the atmosphere as the drilling is taking place, and that is one of the most harmful greenhouse gases. Not only is it contributing to climate change, we don't have any agency to stop that. So once that's in the atmosphere, there's not much we can do about that. So I would say that it's not a cleaner gas than coal or oil. As far as the drilling process and how it's extracted, I think that's something else to put into play. I don't think anything shows us about this process and its effects that it is actually a clean energy. I think that this is just a ploy that the industry is using to get get skeptics onto the side.
Yes.
You said that the practice can sustain the Eastern Seaboard for the next 50 years. I was just curious as to what sort of contingency plan at that point, what will become of the drill sites and all the equipment inherited by that, and also the dump sites. Where are you putting what waste is created by fracking, and what are you going to do after that? Hypothetically speaking, you do get away with 50 years of drilling.
Well, I would hope by 50 years we would need to drill for natural gas anymore. We could find ways to clean up the sites and plant
So there's
trees.
no plan?
Well, no,
Not yet.
not yet. I'm not even sure if we're going to get into it that much.
Okay.
Any questions? Any responses?
Off of that one, of the 67 counties, I believe, 40 of them will be drilled in. And I was just going off of what he said. That's like 3/4 of PA. And if we do that, if we do keep building sites, I mean, and we build housing for all the people who are going to be coming to live at these sites, all the people who, all the jobs it's going to generate, all the other things like that, we're going to be paying all this money into making the communities around the areas and making it more booming of a town in order to let them work and let them be close to it. After that, I mean, you're going to have a lot of housing left over. You're going to have all of this stuff that was built up around it. I mean, once there's no oil there, what's the reason to stay? I mean, it used to be, it was farmland until recently. I mean, after that, you won't have much of a chance of getting back to what it was.
Well, right. 50 years, who knows? Maybe they'll find more natural gas. We don't know. So it's really tough to say what our plan is going to be in 50 years. Nor really know what the future holds.
I think the question that you're bringing up is a good one to consider right now. You mentioned that 3/4 of the state is considering drilling, and I think it's rather suspicious that the counties that are accepting drilling as a way to raise revenue are those that are very economically depressed to begin with. I think it's not coincidental that this gas boom has come at a time of economic downturn when a lot of people are looking for ways to raise their family income. These regions are very economically depressed, and I think that that is a critical factor right now as to why gas drilling has become so popular. And so when you say, you know, workers are going to be coming into these communities are already economically depressed. It puts further strain on their public resources that we really need to consider.
Resources like water won't be
Sorry.
there. Resources, I mean, even being like the water, that won't be able to be accessible if this actually happens
Yeah.
anyway. So we
No.
won't even have the resources to begin with in order to survive either way.
I would totally agree that these places are already experiencing hardships, never mind adding poisoned water to the mixture.
You got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know where you got the 50-year figure from. That seems to me to be an illogical time period to warrant all the research and development that would go into it.
Where did I get the 50-year number from?
Yeah.
I didn't write it down, I'm sorry, but it was, regardless, there's a lot of natural gas. Some people estimate up to 500 trillion cubic feet
Well, I
from
mean,
Marcellus shale, so I
a
mean,
lot to one person and a lot to another person here. So then we're going to go in and we're going to, you know, disregarding whatever environmental consequences, I mean, just from an economic perspective, it seems to me doesn't make sense if it's that short a period of time.
50 years, I believe 50 years is a pretty significant amount of time. It's half most people's lifetimes.
I mean, 50 years worth of natural gas warrants, you know, questionable and, you know, in my opinion, foreign, you know, treatment of our environment, risking the lives of, you know, other members of the Commonwealth. Well, I mean, I mean, I'm not saying natural gas is a bad idea, but if we're only getting 50 years or whatever use out of it, you know, why would we even risk it for something like that?
Well, I guess we just disagree in times. Like, I believe 50 years is an extremely long time to provide someone
also play a little bit of devil's advocate. To start off, since there are different viewpoints of whether or not it should even exist, or whether it should be just regulated or taxed, or whether it should be unhindered the way it is, progressively getting worse. Say if it is going to be here for 50 years, I want the panel's personal opinion. Say for 50 years or more, because maybe they'll have research and development on more efficient ways and stuff like that, maybe it'll last longer. I'm just saying for the future prospects, since they deal with oil. But I want to know if it is even going to last 50 years, in the opinion of the panel. What is your opinion on if it should be totally removed as a viable source of energy, or removed from Pennsylvania, your feelings about it, whether it should be in Pennsylvania and other states, but regulated, taxed, and all these certain restrictions with the environmental protection? Or do you believe it should be unhindered as it is in a blossoming sort of corporate energy coalition? We'll start with Mr. Hibbs.
Well, I agree with your second option. It should be explored. It should also be taxed and regulated by the states. And yeah, everyone stands to make money on it.
I would say that ideally, I would not have it exist at all. However, the communities that they're going into need to make that decision for themselves as to whether they want to allow drilling into their, to their land base. However, I don't think that considering a fossil fuel anymore is a way to energy independence, and that's exactly what natural gas drilling is. It's making fossil fuels another way for our state to become energy independent, and that to me doesn't really make sense. However, as we move forward, the wells are already there. So I would say that as it is, it needs to be a heavily regulated, heavily taxed industry.
Questions from the audience? Yes.
Would you mind talking about the study that you were talking about, the university study?
The Duke University?
Yeah, the Duke University.
Yeah, there is a website out there. I would have to look it up, but several studies have been done by Duke University with their team of researchers, as well as Cornell University. The ones from Cornell University are the first ones to be peer reviewed. I'm not as sure about Duke University, but both had research out there that contributed to what's being studied.
And you said there were only 68 wells?
Yeah, I read they only use 68 wells.
So don't you think 68 wells is well over enough to be considered dangerous?
Well, no, not when there's tens of thousands of wells in Pennsylvania. To use 68 out, even 10,000 is near enough to me to be considered accurate.
Sorry, no. It was those of the 68 wells in this, statistic. For any researcher, I'm sure his sociology class will back me up, and that's a pretty good number for this type of research. That's just kind of how research goes. Sorry. Those are the questions.
I'd like to add to that. I appreciate opinions as much as anybody else in the political science club, college Republicans. I just like to keep, while you can express your opinion, form a question or of some sort. I'm not trying to insult it. It's just, we had the problem last time. Just if you could form some sort of a question with your opinion and your facts, it would just benefit to me. I'm not trying to.
No, it's fine. As soon as I start talking.
Okay. Do you have a response to what he said?
I can feel that and say, as far as the study goes, that was one of the critiques of the study. And I think that on the whole, that's rather true, that 68 wells out of thousands are not enough to make generalizations. However, I'm not so sure that it matters. For a study like this, when you're talking about in one town, most of the contamination was taking place, that's significant. I don't think that when we talk about 68 wells as being minuscule as far as scientific research goes is particularly important to this. We're talking about communities all across the state, not the state as a whole. And so whether a community decides whether they want drilling in their towns or not, 68 wells is a lot. If you're talking about across the state, they've only found 70 wells. As far as on the whole, that doesn't seem to matter a whole lot. However, to those communities, it matters greatly. And so when we talk about research in that sense, we need to consider what kind of scope we're looking at and whether that really matters how many wells have been a part of this research.
You have a question?
Honestly, in my opinion, the validity of the research or how many wells is frankly irrelevant. I would like to know what's the worst we're looking at should a well go south, and what sort of research there is and what sort of practices are being implemented, either in the event that something bad does happen, what can we do to retroactively fix the problem, and what are companies doing, what are these oil companies doing preventatively to stop this sort of thing from happening?
I would say that they're not doing a whole lot. As far as most of the research on this topic goes, most of the research that is being done is by industry commissioned scientists. And so I find that rather questionable as to whether that information that's coming out isn't highly suspicious. Not that it's for sure incorrect, but I think that it's highly suspicious when most of the research that comes out on a topic is by hired people from the industry.
Yeah, wow, that does sound kind of suspicious. Going back to the 68 wells, I really don't think, like you said, I don't think it really personally matters. Like the Duke say, I don't think it does.
Well, really what I'm asking, what's the worst that can happen, and what is implemented to stop it from getting worse or from actually happening? What's the worst these people are facing should a well or a group of wells or 68 wells, for instance, go south or malfunction?
Well, I'm not really aware of how those wells go wrong or go south, as you said. But you have to remember that the oil companies, they want their wells to blow up just about as much as we do. It's not like they make money every time their wells explode. If they lose money, they lose profits, and they look bad. So they're going to try they're going to try very hard to make sure that their wells do not go south.
You have a second response.
Okay, I do have a response. As far as worst case scenario goes, we've already seen a few. There are many of the possible effects that we don't know about. However, to go back to what I was stating before, is that they're finding very high concentrations of methane in sites close to these wells. It's not being studied as much what the effects of drinking the methane are. However, methane in high concentrations blows up, and that happened in 2009 in northeastern PA. A woman, her well just blew up right beside her home, and so that, I would say, would be a worst case scenario, but a lot of them, we're not really all that sure of what will happen.
Just to respond to him, if you go on YouTube, and you can see videos of them putting lighters up to their faucets and then catching on fire from all the methane in it.
Well, that's not good.
Just if you want to know, you can look it up.
Yes. On the topic of prevention and regulation, and this is the both of you, how do both of you feel about who should be policing the corporation? Should it be self-policing? Should it be something where the government gets involved?
I believe that the state should definitely be responsible for regulating it. We would have it at the county level, because they're going to actually care the most. So, yeah, I don't believe federal regulation is the best way to go about it. I believe it should be the states and the counties.
I would say that in an ideal world, citizens would have the ability to police things like corporations and say, I don't want this drill pad in my home anymore. However, as it stands, I think that at the county level it would be most effective, because that would be the biggest decentralization of power to the citizens within that locality. And so I think that that would be the best way to go. I don't think that federal legislation will be the most effective way to do it, because in this situation you want the fastest action to be taken as possible. And so that's what I would say, is that at this point county and state regulation would be the best way to go.
Speaking of regulation, one of your themes earlier was about corporate influence and corporate corruption. Do you have any figures like on past campaigns or political donations or any other type?
When Corbett was elected, it was printed in various newspapers that he took donations from some of these gas companies. They were in very small amounts. However, they were still donations to his campaign, so I think that is significant. However, it doesn't say at all as to why he's taking a strident stance towards more drilling in Pennsylvania. However, they did contribute to it, if only slightly.
I actually didn't really look into political donations as much, but I would assume that if you look at the donations to Corbett and the donations to who he was running against for governor, I believe it was Honorado. Is that right?
Yes.
I think that it would actually probably they'd be pretty similar. They obviously just donate to everyone. They don't care the ones they want to have in their pockets. So.
They also would include judges who decide on compensation claims, right? Yeah. Or high judges.
I don't have any statistics.
Yeah, I don't know anything like that either.
Not every county elects judges in Pennsylvania, so.
Based on the peer review study that we've been talking about, Mr. Hibbs, you said that it's not enough to say that the process is unhealthy. Is the lack of evidence proving it to be unhealthy enough to call it healthy? Like healthy enough to keep drilling?
Well, I wouldn't call it healthy, but I just don't believe you can use one peer-reviewed study to determine the future of natural gas drilling in Pennsylvania.
So it shouldn't decide on the future of whether we should keep doing it. So
Or stop doing it by that same method.
Absolutely. So do you believe? Wait, hold on. So you don't believe that a moratorium for Pennsylvania would be a good call, be a good decision until we actually have good enough studies? Because you're saying this peer-reviewed one, the only one that we do have, is not sufficient enough. So would you personally feel that it would be worthwhile to put a hold and a stop on all of the drilling that was going on right now in order to have factual numbers that would prove or disprove what we've been talking about?
I believe we should keep doing it and do the studies as well. Can't just stop it based on no information.
So what if the studies come up saying that it's extremely negative for everyone in the land?
If it comes up as,
you apologize.
well, you immediately stop and pay compensation. Companies would.
The earth doesn't take money.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I want to keep this moving along. Now that they are here and that they are drilling, they're not going to pick it up and leave now. Although the studies aren't there, they're not. The damage, if there is damage being done, it is going to be done right now. And so to say that pick it up because the studies are bad, then yes, that's a later thing for compensation and reparations. But as of right now, they're not just going to get up and move. So I just want to move along. I mean, if it was before they started drilling, and they got some sort of information, maybe it was wrong for them to start this new thing, but to them it was like a new oil rush down in Texas, and no one knew the detriments of that at the time. But it was a profitable corporation nonetheless, so I'm not fighting for either side. I just want to move it along. So I just don't want to bicker and match. So
I mean, but you used the Texas oil rush.
Yes.
But I mean, in the past we've done that. We've been way too hasty with things, and then been like, oh, we're out of luck right now because we've already jumped into it. Couldn't we have looked at our past trends of jumping into things too, before we're ready about it, before we're knowledgeable about it? I guess it's too late now anyway.
well, that's just what I was saying. I'm not taking either side here. I'm just the moderator. Any questions? Is there one over there?
Well, if we're looking at historical examples, would you draw any parallels between coal mining in Pennsylvania and the way that that affected the environment and the economy, and the way that natural gas drilling and fracking is affecting our current environment and economy?
I don't believe while there are obviously some parallels, like the lack of knowledge, but our technology has increased greatly since the time of mining for coal, or right when it first started. So I'd say we have a better grasp on what we are actually doing to the earth. And now there are groups like the EPA and even regular non-governmental groups that do look out for this kind of stuff, but that wasn't available back then. So.
not as well versed about the coal mining industry as I'd like to be. However, I'd say that there, in a general sense, there are a lot of commonalities. It was mentioned that we have a lot more in structure to combat environmental issues going on right now, but I'd like to mention the fact that Pennsylvania's EPA is going to be disassembled at this moment. So as far as more regulation and more of a structure to combat these issues, I really don't think that there is as much, especially when these industries are regulating themselves. I don't think that that's an improvement at all as far as now we've historically come up with ways to combat it.
I could get summarized facts. We're talking a lot about what we should be doing, but if we could get a summarized quick facts on what's actually going on right now, because it seems like this industry is not being taxed, it's not really being regulated, it's just going.
Well, what the industry has planned now is in the next 30 years, they plan to increase the number of wells by 2,000. The plan that Corbett revealed 2 days ago involved natural gas station pumps within 15 miles in the state of Pennsylvania. From any locality, you could reach a natural gas pump within 15 miles, and on major highways every 2 miles. And this isn't just, this is his stated plan as to what's to happen. And so, yes, it seems to me as though it's going completely unregulated. There's no scientific research being conducted, and there are great plans in the works for these companies to grow and grow and grow at a pretty unprecedented speed.
Just out of curiosity, earlier you said that there exists no regulation to even require these companies to either exclusively hire Pennsylvanians or to actually hire Pennsylvanians at all. I'm just curious if your stance on the whole thing is that fracking should be eliminated or regulated, and if so regulated, what sort of regulations would you agree to?
What I would say is that in an ideal world, we wouldn't rely on things like fracking. However, the reality is that the wells are there. And so without taking a long process to remove these wells, we need to take it into account that that is the situation. And so what I would say is that the industry needs to be heavily regulated. We need what these wells are taking away from our communities to compensate in some way. So what I would say is that it needs to be heavily regulated. We need to make sure that Pennsylvanians are getting these jobs because those are the communities being affected. So I think that a proper balance to that would be that they would be required to hire local people to get these jobs. And so I think that it should be heavily taxed and heavily regulated.
Well, what I'm curious is what sort of regulations is going to make this advertising or suitable for as much as it's going to eventually cost the environment? When would you be okay with fracking?
On a personal level, never. However, I think that what would be most beneficial for our state is to have a moratorium now until more scientific research is done, so that we can find a way to counterbalance these things, at least for even 6 months. In the past few years, there's been one peer-reviewed study. If more funding was put into this, I would say that even in 6 months or a year, there would be a lot more information, a lot more scientific research conducted in order to see what the impacts of this will be, so that we can figure out how we can counterbalance it.
Hey, can you repeat the question real quick, just so?
What sort of regulations would you see to basically, what are those regulations going to look like if you could just regulate the everything hell out of fracking? Like, when would you be happy? When would that be enough?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not that in depth when it comes to the exact schematics of it. But I believe they should test the air quality, make sure methane isn't leaking out. They should test under where they're drilling and make sure that it's not leaking out. There should just be a test around where we're working to make sure that it's not just
in order to do proper testing, I feel like there would need to be some sort of time you weren't actually drilling, and in order to look at the casings, because one of the biggest problems that they're facing is the cement casings that are used, and that, I mean, you're sending really, really high pressured water and chemicals through these just only cement casings in order to break through rock. So, I mean, what's stopping it from breaking through cement? I mean, it's only cement, and you're pumping chemicals and sand through it. It's going to erode. So, I mean, based on those like long-standing tests, I feel like that would be one of the main things that would need to be regulated. But a question for both of you, in order to tie it into a question, would be how far would you like the regulation, similar to the question, but I mean, would you like it the same company doing all of them, all the way down to where the water disposal goes, the recycling of it, where the product goes? I mean, and would you have people in state whose paychecks rely on fracking still going on to be doing these tests?
I guess I can't really say exactly how I would do it, because I'm not really aware of how it would work. But I mean, what I would do is I would hire, I would have local county officials do it. They would regulate themselves, and I guess by company, I think I'd rather have it not be a company, more of it be like a government kind of thing, or like the government should do it, not like a third company, third company. So, it shouldn't be like through a company at all. It should be through the government.
And how much of it would you like them would be ideal? I mean, would you be willing to pay them to regulate? I mean, like, which of the processes, the preparation, just the actual drilling? You mentioned the methane being released. I mean, would you like where the wastewater goes and such things?
Yeah.
All of it, just
yes, it should all be regulated. It's not something to joke around about.